Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 3 of Old School Dives. I'm the king of all wrestling media, Gene Jackson, joining you for a special episode and just a little peek behind the curtain. We had Xander's ready to go. It looked like we wasn't sure if Shane Knowles was going to make it, but once again, he slid in right at the buzzer. Here he is, our co-host with the most, Mr. Shane Knowles. How you doing, buddy?
Woo! I'm well, Gene. How are you?
Doing good, man. Doing good. So I've been excited about it. So, we originally had planned for episode 3. We're going to talk about Adrian Street, and we're still going to be doing that in episode 4. Um, last Sunday night, Ric Flair's last match happened in Nashville. I bought the pay-per-view, watched it at home. You went and experienced it live. And I've intentionally not talked to you this week because I'm really excited to hear the live perspective of the show compared to me watching it at home, the things I've read from other people I know that watched it at home. And so to get your take on the live experience as well as all the people around you, I've got everything lined up. We've got the graphics for each match. So we're going to we'll go through this thing match by match and we'll kind of compare notes on it. We'll talk about, who won, who lost. And then you sent in some pictures that you took there at the event. So once we go through everything, we're going to go through those pictures one by one. You can kind of explain those pictures, and like I say, just kind of tell us about your whole experience overall. Of course, we don't want to jump to the end and discuss the thing that everybody's waiting to hear our take on, I'm sure. But just tell us a little bit about just getting to Nashville and just your experience, getting into the arena and all that.
First time I've been actually in Nashville since 2002. I've passed through Nashville a number of times on my way to Kentucky or other places, but everything that you've heard about Nashville, how much it's grown in the last 10, 15 years, is accurate. The downtown Nashville area, booming. I felt like there was a crane on every block building new venues, new business ventures. As far as getting into the arena, the first parking deck was completely full. All 7 levels, all the way to the rooftop, was full. So we had to go to another one down the street from the municipal auditorium. Entry was not a problem. A couple of takeaways. I mean, I have several, but we're talking about just getting in. One thing I noticed about this event, I don't think I saw many children at all at this event, and that's unheard of. Whether it be independent wrestling shows, certainly WWE, AEW, it is filled with a lot of the ages 6 through 16. Didn't see a lot of that. The demographic for this show felt like anywhere between the ages, 35 and 70, which I think is pretty much a peak when people would have seen Flair and got to be a fan during that time. I don't think Ric Flair's last match really would have resonated with a lot of 12-year-olds. Now maybe the
Right.
maybe the undercard, and we'll certainly get to that, would have. But as far as the main man on the marquee, not so much. Gene, one thing that I noticed, tons of wrestling shirts. And not like Roman Reigns, John Cena, Kenny Omega. I'm talking about Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, Roddy Piper, certainly the abundance of Flair shirts, Four Horsemen.
Right.
Texas Tornado, not Kerry Von Erich, the Texas Tornado shirt from like the WWF catalog in 1991. Um, my favorite shirt, and I don't know if this was custom or not, or if you can order it somewhere. I've been meaning to look. The guy had on a pair of like border shorts that were Razor Ramon's trunks, the pink with the yellow razor blades
Nice.
all around. But his shirt was a picture of the Jake the Snake Roberts LJN figure. I don't know if I can get my hands right. With that pose, and on the shirt, and you can blip this out if we need to, it says, "How the fuck am I supposed to DDT looking like this?" On the shirt.
Which
And I laughed at that
even
shirt
as a kid,
forever.
that's a question we all asked ourselves back then. Maybe not that
Mhm.
vulgarly, but we all thought that for sure.
I
Uh,
saw
One of my
Freebird's
favorite
shirt,
shirts.
and I'm one of the guys, by the way. I wore my Rapmaster PNU shirt because I said if there's any crowd that would get this shirt, and I had one guy that I walked by, I heard him going, "The hell did I just see a PNU shirt?" And then at the end of the night, when it was over, one guy came up and was like, a PNU shirt. So the difference in people
The
recognizing
enthusiasm
that.
level.
Hmm.
That's awesome. I need one of those. I once tried to start to lobby for a promotion, needed to book P Dog versus PN News whenever PN News first turned back up on
Yes.
the scene a few years ago. One of my favorite shirts I saw at the convention one time, and I'm sure you probably are at the same convention I saw it at, honestly. But there was a guy walking around. It was either one of the Charlotte conventions or maybe it was the one in Atlanta. It was a yellow T-shirt. It had a picture of Big Boss Man and Akeem, the Twin Towers, and it said "Never Forget" across the bottom of it, which not exactly tasteful, but it was funny for the
Yeah,
people
with
who
the
got it and
joke in
understood it.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I've been to the Municipal Auditorium. I've been to a couple of Ring of Honor shows there. I went to Starcade '96 there when
Oh
Hogan
wow.
wrestled Piper. So I've been there a few times. So it's actually a pretty good venue for wrestling. There's not really a bad seat in there. I've been everywhere from the front row back to nearly the last row at different shows there, and always found it to be a pretty nice venue for wrestling. Do you agree?
I do. And now my only complaint talking about seats, the day that these tickets went on sale back in June at noon Eastern, I was in the queue at 12:03, got two seats floor seating, which for this event, the first 8 rows were all reserved for family, other peers of Ric Flair, which we'll get into, and
Yeah.
people that bought these super ticket packages along with the convention StarCast. Floor seating was general admission, which I was a little trepidatious upon seeing that. And then you had the upper deck and bleacher seating. We arrive. There's not two seats together on the floor. And what people, we went up and asked when we did see two seats. Everybody was like, "Oh, somebody's sitting here." I felt like Forrest Gump. Seats taken. Seats taken. Well, after
Yeah.
about a half hour, I don't see people in these seats, and I'm like, I think this is what's going on at like a movie theater where myself included, if you want to be comfortable, you get a seat, you make sure there's two or three beside you open before the next person is over there. So I went to security and I said, we need to get two seats for general admission. His response was, find two open seats. And I said, sir, we've been trying to do that for a half hour. I thought you might assist us. But I did the math. My friend Parker and I that went with me, we were among maybe 500 to 600 people standing behind the ringside seats. I look up in the upper deck, doing the quick math, because sometimes as a promoter, the count is a little close. Like about 500 or 600 empty seats up top. I have no way of proving this, but I'm just thinking 500 or 600 people that bought those upper deck seats came down and robbed the floor general admission seating. This isn't against Conrad Thompson or anyone else that promoted the event. It's for that venue. Very bad security. So
Yeah.
I was like, well, if we can't get floor seating, we're going to be front row of the 500 people that are standing. So my friend and I are in the first row of people standing behind the 8 ringside. But that was, I think, anything going forward. I just don't understand why it was general admission floor seating because that was asking for trouble, and on our end, it
Yeah.
certainly happened.
They got it. But you know, Conrad's ran a lot of conventions and everything. This was his first foray into running an actual wrestling show, and I can speak from experience. The first Starcast was a cluster. I think he's figured it out since then. If I understand, it's gotten a lot of smoother. But holy shit, that one in Chicago was a fiasco. Before we move on, though, just want to point out Cabana Man Dan says I'd pop for a PN News shirt. Well, of course, man. That's good
Well,
stuff.
and
Yeah,
then
good
how I
stuff.
got this shirt, I'll give a cheap plug for a guy, Tommy Fierro, based out in New Jersey, that runs 80s wrestling auctions on Facebook. And if anyone's familiar with him, he's always auctioning old merchandise stuff, house show programs, magazines that are in good condition. Just happened to be one night around 9:30 with the auction ending at 11 o'clock. He had a Rapmaster PN News shirt from 1991 WCW. The opening bid was $5. I bid seven and won it. And I was just amazed. $7. I think there was three people who bid on it, and I got the shirt. And I think that's only like the third time I've ever worn it in my
Wow.
life.
So here's the poster for the event there, and I guess we'll talk about when we get to the main event. We'll kind of talk about the build up, the story they told to get there, and kind of your thoughts on all that. But we'll kind of go step by step through the show. So of course we've got a uh, a recreation of the old WTBS set. We got Tony Schiavone and David Crockett there, and throughout the night They cycled, in different people based on the match. Like the TNA matches, you had like Scott D'Amore out there, and people who were kind of, I guess, more or less experts or the most knowledgeable people on the commentary team for each match based on the promotion. So that made it interesting having people with some insight. Because Buzz Hart, David Crockett. I mean, apparently there's everybody with nostalgia is looking back on it fondly now, but for years it's always been, the knock on David Crockett was, he wasn't the best announcer. It was always, look at him, Tony, and and then look at him squeezing tighter and tighter. He had like 4 lines that he would always say, whip him like a dog, which he got in later in the broadcast, which was fun. But he clearly had not watched wrestling since he got out of it. It seemed like in 1989, he really didn't know who a lot of people were. Shivani, I was impressed, knowing that he really had stepped away from wrestling entirely until he stepped back in for AEW. Had done his homework because he knew who a lot of people were that he probably shouldn't have, and seemed to have a little background on him. So I was impressed with that. But being an old school fan such as myself, how did you feel looking over there, seeing that set and seeing Tony Schiavone and David Crockett standing in front of it?
I mean, it was to from where we were sitting. It was well, looking at it, it would have been to the left of the stage, and that was one of the first things I noticed. Was I like, this feels like 1986 again, because I see them with the blazers on, and I think, and you watching on pay-per-view, didn't Nick Aldis come up there
He
at one
did,
point? We
yeah.
saw him, but yeah, Crockett and Shivani, just that old school look. It was really cool that it was off to the left of the stage, and we did see various people coming in and out. I saw Scott D'Amore, as you mentioned. My question for you, Gene, your perspective watching on Fight TV, sound quality, video production, was it pretty much up to snuff? I mean, not maybe what you would think WWE or AEW is doing, but for this
Right.
event.
Overall, it was pretty good. The music was way too loud. Like that, the Mid Atlantic theme that they played throughout the night just
Mhm.
overpowered everything. Like it was super loud. But you could hear the commentators real well during the matches, and you could hear the ring announcer. So overall, it was good. But it's just like every time they played any of the music, the people's music they came out to, or especially like that Mid Atlantic thing, it's like holy crap! Like level that out for God's sake. But I've seen it much worse. So you know, let's see if some asshole don't quit messaging me, so I'm having to try to read shit while we're talking. He knows I hate that, so he's fucking doing it. Let's
Wait
see.
till after the show, James Hardy.
No, it's not that
Okay.
asshole. You can guess who it would be. Dustin Burcham said sounded better than their panels did. So I guess that's during the Starcast stuff. I guess maybe
Mhm.
some of that was hard to hear. Um, and I didn't get to see any of that, so I don't know. But that's not surprising because I know in the past that's been an issue at different times too. So I don't have the graphic for the opening match. I've got one for every other match, but your opening match, Bunkhouse Battle Royal, which that's an old Jim Crockett themed match. You had the Bunkhouse Stampede that Dusty Rhodes always won. It became a tradition.
Amazingly.
Amazingly, coincidentally, if you will. Um, who were you pulling for in this one? Looking at who all was in the ring.
Bully Ray. And
Bully Ray.
unfortunately, this was the match I didn't get to see a ton of because this is right when we were having the seat dilemma with security. So it was kind of like one shoulder over, one shoulder looking for seats. So I didn't get to enjoy this match as much as I did others.
I didn't. So I didn't realize that I didn't realize there was a pre-show and that any of the card was going to be shown on a pre-show. So I've got it pulled up on Fight TV and it says show starts in 36 minutes or whatever. And then my brother-in-law sends me a text and he's got a picture of the screen. He's like, "Hey, I'm watching Ric Flair's last match tonight." And I was like, "Well, I'm planning to, but where the hell are you watching that?" And he's like, "It's on YouTube." But when the time I found it on YouTube, the Bunkhouse Battle Royal was just about to start, and that's when they played Nick Gage's music, and he came
Mhm.
out and brought out the team of GCW guys for the battle royal. What was the? It was kind of hard to tell. Like, what was the reaction of that crowd for the GCW bunch and Nick Gage in general?
Mixed, I think. And I said there wasn't a lot of kids, a lot of young children. Of the older crowd, I guess I consider myself that now, I'll be 43 in a month and a half, older than me, into the 50s, 60s demographic. Seemed like they even knew who they were. But now your younger fans in that 25 to 40 range, which certainly seems to be, like an AEW type audience, or even WWE for that matter, even though they cater to younger children. They popped big for Nick Gage, but it was kind of mixed. Some were like losing their mind, and others were like, popcorn, And
I don't get Nick Gage. Um, I mean, I know he's a deathmatch guy. I know there was an episode of Dark Side of the Ring that kind of brought him to the forefront for present day fans that weren't necessarily, or mainstream fans, I should say, that weren't necessarily familiar with him. I don't get how he's the king of anything. To me, he looks like a intellectually challenged Shawn Michaels of present day. I don't know, but there are a certain you see those matches where he wrestled Matt Cardona in front of the GCW crowd, and they love that dude to death. So I mean, you can't knock him. He has an audience. I don't get Tony Khan bringing him on Dynamite and having him wrestle Chris Jericho on national TV,
Mhm.
but
Well, and I mean, I may catch heat for this, and that's fine because it will be cheap, right? But
that's what we
um,
do.
not just because I've worked with a gentleman before, and I don't know if he'd like to be called gentleman, but Tank in death matches, Tank can really work. Tank is a very smart individual. And I'm not saying Nick Gage is because I never met the individual, but I think a lot of people, the perception, if you didn't know Tank, you would be like, here's the guy with skewers in the head and busted up balls. But Tank actually has a repertoire, a move set of wrestling moves. Like if it's not a death match, he can actually work a good pro wrestling style match. Very sharp on finishes, counters, transitions. I don't see a lot of that with Nick Gage sometimes. It seems to be just pizza cutters, just all the violence. And I wonder if you took those elements away from him, could he work a good 10, 12-minute match? Because I know Tank can. I think
Yeah.
that's what separates him on that.
And that's what frustrates me. The guys like Tank doesn't need all that. I mean, he does it
Mhm.
because there's a market for it, and it made him a bigger name in the business than I guess just being a big guy from Georgia wrestling. But he understands the business. He's like you said, he's got psychology. I've seen him work great just regular matches,
Mhm.
and that's been my biggest knock on deathmatch wrestling. Not to carry this on a whole different down a different road, but just the fact there's so many people that have gotten famous in deathmatch wrestling, and Nick Gage is probably an example of that can't work a lick. They're just willing to mutilate themselves in front of people for money, and I don't see the talent in that. But that, like I say, that's a whole nother podcast. We won't go there tonight. But the winner of the match ended up being Mance Warner, a guy that what I've seen of him, I've enjoyed. I know. I know Conrad's a fan. I wasn't really surprised when he won because I know Conrad's a fan of his and he hangs out there with everybody. So there's Effie pouring him some beer, and then there he is with the belt buckle over there and the boot with Tony Schiavone, and Bully Ray came over and kind of endorsed him to some degree as well. So I'm sure that was a big moment for Mance Warner.
Mhm.
So I thought that was a good choice. I mean, looking around the ring, if Bully Ray couldn't win it, I thought if and especially if you're going to try to put over a young guy that could use the win and hopefully build off of it and go somewhere with it. I think if you're not going to let Adam Priest win it, then Mance Warner's the second best option.
And very nice gesture to donate proceeds to the Dusty Rhodes Foundation off that bunkhouse
Absolutely.
stampede. That was pretty cool.
Absolutely, like we said, he was the king of the bunkhouse stampede. Now, I was pretty. This is there were a couple of matches on the card that kind of sold me on going ahead and buying the pay per view, and this was one of them. The Impact Wrestling Dream Tag Team match, the American Wolves, Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards against the Motor City Machine Guns, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin. Now, I'm a big fan of those guys. Mutual friend of ours, Scott Morgan, is a big fan of all those guys. Um, how was that match in person?
Crisp. And this was only their second meeting. I think it happened. Was it either a house show or a TNA Impact show back in 2011? Was the
Yeah, and
only
I
other
was
meeting
shocked to
between the
hear that. I
worlds?
just
Yeah,
assumed that those guys had to have crossed paths in Ring of Honor at some point, but they weren't there
somewhere.
at the
Yeah,
same time.
crisp, snug. Crowd was really appreciative of those guys, and this is something we'll talk about as we go through these matches. But I just want to say it right now. This match was what, about 11 or 12 minutes, Gene?
Yeah, in that range.
One thing that got me, and one of my most, what I was most impressed by, because I had the fear of this show is starting at 6:05 Central, 7:05 Eastern. With 11 matches total, 10 on the undercard, I was preparing myself doom and gloom to not get out of here till midnight.
Yes.
And I was amazed that the undercard matches were kept tight. Several of them under 10 minutes, most all of them under 15. And I'll go ahead and say this with the show starting, Eastern Central Time, whatever, 6:05 Central, 7:05 Eastern. By the time all the hoopla and the gaga, whatever, when the bell rang for the main event, 9:20 Eastern, 8:20 Central. They got 10 matches in 2 hours and 15 minutes. Very impressive on the pacing. And I know Brian James was one of the producers of the show. So kudos to him on keeping time.
Yeah, that was awesome. Rosie was shocked because she got off work at 7, got home at 7:30, and she's like, "Oh, I'll be going to bed for the main event ever comes to the ring." So
Mm-hmm.
she went and took a shower and all this, and I was like, "Hey, the match is fixing to start. If you want to come watch it." She's like, "The main event?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Were they doing it? They're not doing it last?" I'm like, "Yes, this is the last match." She's like, "How the hell did they
Mm-hmm.
get through all those matches?" I was like, "Hey, they've been cranking them out, buddy." But yeah, I was. If it was me, and I'm interested to hear your take on this, being a promoter and a booker, such as you are, having done it for a long time, looking up and down that card, I don't see a better match up and down the lineup to start the show off with. I thought that was a great choice as the opening match for the pay per view. Would you
You
agree,
and
or was there another match you think might have fit the bill better?
Yeah, you and I both, and I heard some fans around me, and we'll get to it. The four-way later, they were like, "Oh man, they should have opened with that." And the promoter Booker and me just went, "No, dear God, they shouldn't, because we would have had you all through the roof, and nothing could follow the opener." And you really don't want, you want the opener to be good, which is what that tag team match was, but you don't want
Yes.
it to be like, man, the rest of the show just fails in comparison to this. So where that match was slotted, I thought was also nicely done.
I totally agree. And so in the number 2 spot, we go to Killer Cross with Scarlett taking on Harry Smith, aka Davy Boy Smith Jr., the British Bulldog. That was a match that I was kind of looking forward to just because I haven't seen a lot of Killer Cross. I've heard a lot about him. I've
Hmm.
seen a couple of matches, but I really haven't seen a lot of him. I don't know. I wasn't overwhelmed with that match. I mean, it wasn't bad per se, but it just I don't know. I was just kind of indifferent to it. I don't know. What was your take in person?
This is where I started noticing the time, because this match was about 8 minutes, and when the bell rang, it was the look of shock of, oh my goodness, because I started putting two and two together. I was like, the tag match went about 11. This one went less than 9. We may not be here at midnight when the bell rings for, I'm like, whoa, somebody's onto something here. But I was really excited to see Harry Smith in person. And Gene, you may know better than I. Is Harry Smith the last, what do you want to call it, participant entry into the Heart Dungeon?
I believe
That
so.
actually, the actual Heart Dungeon. So that was something that I was thinking about. I was like, I don't think anybody came after him.
Is he and Tyson Kidd? They were both there around like the same time, right? So they kind of came through
Hmm.
together. Them two and Teddy.
Hmm.
So they all were like the last group. So yeah, I don't think anybody came out of there after that. Um, he's an impressive guy. I mean, and he's a good worker. I don't know what's held him back from not making it bigger than he's had a couple of times in WWE where it looked like he was about to take off, and then this last time he was there, and then all of a sudden he wasn't. I don't know what the story on that is,
Yeah,
but
we hear stories of shooting himself in the foot,
yeah,
unfortunately, and I don't know if those are true or not. But he never seems to stick anywhere long, as far as like in the big prominent promotions.
which is unfortunate because he's a talented guy and he's got a good look. Killer Cross, like I said, I just haven't seen enough of him to really make a decision on him yet. But I think he's got a big future ahead of him, and of course having Scarlett out there with him certainly doesn't hurt. So
And one more thing about the time in particular to this match, I'm a-okay with it as a fan. But I think, the last 3 years, AEW, and no one probably is going to take my words to heart, but let this be a lesson to you, AEW. You can have good matchups with good action that can get done in under 15 minutes. In this case, in under 10, it might not have blown you away, but it was solid. Not everything has to go 20 to 25.
And if Conrad was doing another show, there's room for another match between these two. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the thing that always frustrates me about like the few AEW pay per views I've bought. They go on for hours, and I mean I've gotten two mostly based off the CM Punk matches, and just the whole things went on forever. And that was always my thought. Was like, what are they going to do in the next one? Like you've seen everything everybody can do tonight. Like why do
It's
I
a
need
war
to?
of attrition for a fan to stick through an AEW pay per view.
Yeah, the last one I didn't get Forbidden Door, but the last one I watched where Punk beat Page, that thing went on. I mean, it was over 4 hours. I mean, it was like WrestleMania before they went to two
Mm-hmm.
nights. It was insane. I was so just by the time that match got to the ring, it was like, oh,
You're
finally,
nodding off,
okay, yeah. I was like, gee, I mean, there is definitely such a thing as too much of a good thing. So I'm like you, I'm noticing this too, and I'm like okay, well, unless they're just making room for somebody else to come along and just really, really put in some time, like we're going to keep this thing moving. Because I was like you when I was apprehensive about buying the pay per view, just when I seen there were 11 matches, like, oh, gee, like this is going to be one of these marathons, man. Like I don't know if I'm
Mm-hmm.
up for that, but next match we got Jonathan Gresham, Nick Wayne, Alan Angels, and I Kanasuke take a shit. I don't know. I'm sure that's not how you say it, but forgive me for butchering his name. But
I believe they
uh,
pronounce it Sheeta,
oh, Shita. Okay, well, my apologies to Mister
if
Shita.
memory serves.
But I was not. So going into the, let me pull that picture back up again. Going into this, obviously, I'm familiar with Alan Angels. Obviously, I'm familiar with Jonathan Gresham. Didn't know who Nick Wayne was, and I have seen some stuff just recently about Sheeta. Um, and I didn't really have any expectations coming into this one. It wasn't a bad match. I expected Gresham to win, but then again, I was like, well, I don't know. All the talk lately was at the end of this month or whatever, he's taking an indefinite leave from wrestling, so maybe
Mm-hmm.
he won't win if he's planning on stepping away. So
Yeah, there was a question mark to me about whether or not he would show up following the fallout of Death and Dishonor, the ROH pay per view, which could have easily been fixed into a triple threat. But I'm glad he made it. Been on one show with Gresham, don't really know him that well. Certainly worked with Alan Angel some over at Peach State. Good to see him in that environment. This was a match where I thought all four guys got pretty much an equal opportunity to display their skills.
yeah, it was laid out well to feature everybody, and I mean, it'd been nice to see Alan Angel's going to win, but I think if Gresham is maybe going to stick around, and as well he should. I mean,
Mhm.
um, it's not unique for anybody to feel slighted by Tony Khan not giving them the push they feel they deserve or the attention they feel they deserve, and there's certainly no shame in losing to Claudio. So
No.
just take it easy, you'll be all right, buddy. So the next match is our legacy match, I think they referred to it. And so you got Kerry and Ricky Morton along with Robert Gibson representing the Rock and Roll Express. Brian Pillman Jr. and Brock Anderson along with Arn representing the Horsemen. We've got a couple other pictures of this match here. There's Arn coming down. There you see, oh gosh, I just blanked out on the name of the security guard there.
Doug Dillinger.
Doug Dillinger, I was impressed to see at ringside.
Hmm.
And there you see Pillman Jr., the Mortons in the background with our friend Mike Posey, the no
Hmm.
showing podcast guest in the ring. I don't know. Maybe that's on Xanders and not on Posey. We'll never know. We'll never know. And there you see. I'm gonna get your take on this here momentarily, but I was really impressed with the team of Pillman and Anderson. And, I would really enjoy seeing that go further in AEW. I think they got a lot of potential. And it's just really, I mean, it was like watching Arn and Brian Pillman tagged 15, 20 years ago. I
Hmm.
mean, both of those guys have so many of the mannerisms of their fathers. It's almost bizarre.
Well, and that was one thing takeaway. I was like, no offense to the Varsity Blondes with Griff Garrison, but after seeing that, I feel like they're underutilizing Brian Pillman Jr. because man, the mullet is more feathered since I've last seen him in person. He's always in good shape, but man, he looks tight and compact now, man. And of course, you get it. He's a good-looking guy, so the babyface deal, the second generation, with his father's tragic passing. But Brian Pillman Jr. is a good heel,
Yeah.
very good heel. And of course, this was the match. Don't get me wrong; that there was a pop for the Wolves and for the Motor City Machine Guns, Cross, Smith. But when I say pops, when Arn came out with Brock and Pillman, and then Ricky was carrying Robert, that's where I saw the big swelling of, oh boy, now, I mean, and I
Yeah.
hate to say that like those other matches were throwaways. They certainly were not. But I'm saying in attendance, this is where the live crowd really started to get buzzing. Like, man, here's some shit we really want to see and
Yeah.
came
I
to see.
mean, with that age group you
The
described,
wave of nostalgia.
this
Yeah.
is their people right here because you got
Hmm.
the guy, Arn and Ricky that they're familiar with from the past, but then they got the next generation of them. Like everything about that match is like, okay, this is what we're here to see tonight. And real quickly, Grant, our friend, Mr. Bundy, says, I have a story about this match. Well, feel free to share it in the comments and we'll circle back to it here. If not, then we'll get it from you at another time. I'm interested to hear
Me
what
too.
that story is.
Now, I died laughing that Arn Anderson is wearing navy blue sweatpants out to the ring, doing his best Mick Foley impression to manage
Yeah,
his son and
say
Brian
I know
Pillman Jr.
surely Foley had to applaud that.
Because you
I
think of
can
Arn in
never
AEW, it's the sweater vest and the khakis, and I'm like, nah, he just rolled off the couch.
and the Waffle House menu is Jericho. That's probably my favorite line that Jericho has said since he's been in AEW. Um, I always I can never get over the fact. I put this on Facebook one time, but I really mean it. Every time I see Brock Anderson looks like the guy who would play Arn Anderson on Young Rock on
Yes.
NBC. That's
Yes.
I put that on Twitter, and his mother came back, liked, and retweeted that. So I was like, okay,
Nice.
well they didn't take it as a knock, so I didn't mean it as one.
And I don't know how this came across watching on pay per view, but this was me in person looking at him. If anyone looked more uninterested to be there than Robert Gibson, I couldn't name him. He did. I don't know if Robert. I wouldn't even ask him this, but I don't know if he just felt like maybe it should be me and Ricky, not Ricky and Kerry, because the Rock and Roll
Yeah,
Express are on their retirement tour. I mean, don't get me wrong. Robert gave the signal to the crowd, but then for the whole match, he just looked so disheveled, just like,
yeah, because Ricky's kind of made it known that the retirement tour is all about him, not him retiring, just the Rock and Rolls
Mhm.
retiring and him going on to tag with Kerry and work with Kerry more. So I figure there's a little bit of saltiness to that. So Grant says, watch it back, look at Pillman in makeup, then just imagine Arn and Ricky's reaction in the back. Yeah, I can see that, I guess. So our next match, you've got this. Okay, so this is the four-way. Now,
Ooh.
I was telling Xanders this before we went on the air. We were talking about the show. I've got a phone call, so I didn't watch this match as close as I watched the other matches. But it seemed like every time I looked up, there was it looked like something close to a botch where somebody was nearly about to die. Like I looked at one time and uh, Ray Phoenix, it looked like he nearly landed on his head on the floor. Like it was like this close to probably breaking his neck. So every time I looked, it looked like something crazy kind of botch happened that looked rough. But then like afterwards and since then, I've seen everybody's like, "Oh, that was the greatest freaking match of all time. It was awesome. It was the best match on the show." And I'm like, "All right, I need to go back and rewatch that." And I had every intention of rewatching that match specifically before we did this podcast just to give it a fair shake, but I never got the time. So you were there live, you watched it, and you saw the reaction as you've already kind of alluded to. What was your take on that match?
Well, certainly anyone that had not been woken up in the crowd yet to this point was awakened midway through this match. And I think whether that style of wrestling is your favorite or not, in person, I even though I've watched a ton of this on like shows I promoted or shows I've been on or even on TV, but seeing it as a fan, that style of athleticism, and we can get into the gymnastics routine, trampoline, whatever you want to call it. They're doing things a lot of guys cannot do. And one in particular that stood out to me when Scott Steiner would hold a guy. I don't know if I can get my hands here, but like say, like you go to give me a high cross body and I catch you where you're across sideways, where Scott Steiner would flip backwards with the body slam.
Yeah.
Two of those guys in that match, I think it was Ray Phoenix and Torres, did it from the top rope to the outside. Let that sink in a second.
Yeah.
My mind boggled him holding him on the top rope and flipped backwards with the slam, and I thought they died. Torres, I was not really familiar with. That guy, a powerhouse, did the gorilla press slam from the top rope.
Yeah.
Bandito's very flashy. I mean, I don't know if there's a more flashy wrestler than Ray Phoenix to see. The way he can springboard from second rope to top, back down, he's just phenomenal. And I mean, I think this match may have been the one that got the second most time, maybe around 15 minutes. I could
Yeah.
be off on it. It felt like 15. But even some people, that are sitting like this for the first few minutes, I think once we got about halfway through the match, they were getting into it. There was the "this is awesome" chance because much like what we will talk about with the main event, this was a spectacle in a completely different way. And that's just what it felt like to me. I was just watching people's reactions because I think that word "death defying" gets thrown out a lot. But man, seeing that in person, I was cringing. I was like, I hope they're okay. And then they got up and do
I
something
mean, can you imagine being the guy that's being held up in the slam position as they get ready to turn the flip out to the floor? Like that's
Oh
a
my
lot of
God.
that's a whole lot of trust to have for anybody.
And the gorilla press from the top rope, because when he
Yeah.
jumped and as he landed with his feet, that's when the impact of he put him down. And I'm like, that bump's got to sting from that, from that high up. But um, it was fun to watch. I'm glad there was not a whole lot of other matches like this. Another thing, and I hate to sound like an AEW basher because there's a lot about AEW I like, but the reason this match stood out, it was the only one pretty much like it on the card. It wasn't
Yeah.
preceded and followed by one pretty much a carbon copy.
I think, and I think that about a lot of things, be it lucha libre style wrestling, strong style wrestling, death match, any of that stuff. There's a place for that on a show. It's just like I've never been able to really sit through PWG shows because it's one of those matches, one after another, and after about the third or fourth one, it's just like, okay, how many near falls are we gonna have here? Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
by the time you get to the main event, you're just burned out. Like just
You're spent.
I am. I'm like, okay, this isn't even dramatic anymore. And it's just like on deathmatch. By the time you see that 100th light tube get busted, you're like, hmm. And I mean, I've witnessed that in person. I've been to some of them Kevin Brandon, Carnage Cups. And the first light tube that gets busted, everybody's like, oh. And then by the end
Yeah.
of the night, they're breaking 100 of them. And then people are just like, how much longer is this shit, And it's
Well,
the
and
same
that's
way with
why.
those types of matches. Like you said, that one match will stand out forever as being one of the highlights of that show. But if you'd had four more of it and been like, was it the one with Ray Phoenix or was it that other one with so and so or no, it was that
Mm-hmm.
first one that I saw Torres in Nashville actually at the old fairgrounds, Rey Mysterio when he had that Aero Lucha show.
Mm-hmm.
The main event was a 6-man tag, and Rey Mysterio was in it. I forget who else, but that Torres guy. And I was really amazed at a guy his size able to do the things that guy can do. It's pretty crazy.
Well, you were talking about structure, by the way. A couple of times in my in-ring career, I've been part of shows where I was one of two cage matches, and I would request both times, can my cage match be first? And both times, and I won't name the promoters, they were kind of shocked, like, what, you want to go on semi-main or the last? And I said, no, because if we go on first, we're going to have the freshness of what you're talking about, the first match in the cage. And
Yeah.
not that I think we will set the toughest act to follow, but if anyone in the other cage match comes off the top rope with a hurricane run or a splash, I was like, we're done. As far as like
Yeah.
what we can pop them with. So let's get the introduction in the cage and save the other match behind us. So
To this day, I'm still shocked that anybody thought it was a good idea to do those TNA lockdown shows where every match was in a steel cage. Like, you're so done with steel cage matches by about the fourth match on the show out of 9. So our next match is an Impact World Title match where you got the Impact World Champion Josh Alexander defending against MLW star Jacob Fatu. So you're going into this one going, well, that's interesting. It's for the Impact title. One guy doesn't wrestle for Impact. I wonder how this is going to turn out. And it turned out exactly the way you would assume that it would, based on that scenario. But I'm impressed by. I haven't seen a lot of Josh Alexander. I've seen a good bit of Jacob Fatu and MLW, but he's come a long way from when he first, came on the scene. And he's impressive for again, kind of like Torres. He's really impressive for a guy that size to be able to do the things he does, and seemingly effortlessly a lot of times. How did that match come off live?
Well, unfortunately, I won't lie. I won't embellish or exaggerate. This was the match where I had to go to the restroom and get concessions. So I'm not going to make up some, oh, it was great, or I saw this and that. I caught the very tail end of it. So this is one that I would actually like to go back from the pay-per-view and see. That way I could say I saw the entire card, but I didn't see a good portion of this match, unfortunately.
Now, since he's been on the Indies, Matt Cardona has been getting just like nuclear heat on shows almost everywhere he goes, but especially those. That's one thing I can say for like those GCW shows. Like some of the heel shit Matt Cardona's done, like when he won their title, and some of the, has been some of the best like heel heat you've seen on an independent, like real. Like they wanted to kill. It wasn't like playing along. Like they wanted to kill that dude when he won their damn world title. Based on who that crowd was that night and who they were there to see, did he get a lot of heat with that crowd, or was it kind of eye roll? Like, yeah, that's exactly what the hell we thought would happen or run in.
Yeah, it was kind of a here we go kind of moment.
That's what I figured, because that's how I felt watching at home. I'm like, okay, well, I assumed it was going to be some screw job run in type finish. The next match, another tag team match. This one, Marshall and Ross Von Erich, the sons of Kevin Von Erich, against the Briscoe brothers. And I've been a big fan of the Briscoes since the early days of ROH, back when they were the two dudes in singlets, and have kind of followed them over the years. The Von Erichs, I've seen some of their stuff in MLW. And another team that's like, hey, they got the legacy, they've got all that. I've never really been overwhelmed with any of the work that I've seen. And this match kind of proved to be more the same. But when they came out, like last time I saw them, they both wore tights and stuff. So when they come out, I'm like, holy shit, the smoking guns are back. Look at this. But
Billy and Bart Von Erich.
Exactly. Like, but it wasn't a bad match. Like, I felt like the Briscoes probably got the best match out of the Von Erichs that I've seen them have. But admittedly, I haven't seen a lot.
Selfishly, I was hoping Kevin Von Erich would be with his sons just for the magnitude of this event. Two, I was very skeptical that we were going to get a replacement of maybe Anderson and Gallows, because earlier in the day, the Von Erich's flight from Hawaii was delayed. They were not able to make their scheduled meet and greet at StarCast, so it was kind of really a good treat. However, they did get a second flight and pretty much were rushed to the building and got there. But this is no detriment to them, but like what you said, to seeing in person, you can see who the more polished tag team is.
Yeah.
The Briscoes, from having worked a variety of people across the United States. And they just worked FTR the weekend before in a tremendous main event for ROH. And I like Marshall and Ross Von Erich. There's potential, but how much seasoning are you getting just working in Hawaii for the most part?
Yeah. And on those MLW shows, because I guess they're starting to pick up. They're running a little bit more now, but used to, they do those kind of like Impact. They do those marathon tapings for 3 or 4 days, and then they wouldn't wrestle again for 6 months. But anyway, a fun match, and it's always good to see the Briscoes on something like this. So then we go to the women's triple threat match. You got the Impact Knockouts champion Jordan Grace against Deonna Purrazzo and Rachel Ellering. Your thoughts?
It looked like Rachel Ellering hurt her foot early in the match, and then when I got home and
Definitely.
started reading some recaps of the shows, they'd come to fruition to be true. Jordan Grace, I like her. There's just she's built. She's physically impressive. I wish they hadn't tried the Tower of Doom spot over in the corner. That looked a little wonky in person. I think Jordan Grace is a very good heel.
Yeah.
And certainly some of the things she said, not in character, so to speak, within the last month, and you can read all about those, have certainly
We've
gotten
actually
her
talked
more
about it
heat
on
than,
GP TV Live. You can check out in the archives
yeah,
there.
may get her more heat than she ever will stepping through the ropes of the squared circle. But pretty much not surprised that she went over. Um, Unfortunately, with this crowd, there was a lot of jeering, a lot of vulgarity being directed. And I mean, I was a little disappointed because I was like, man, I thought we'd kind of come past that,
Yeah.
in women's wrestling now.
Yeah. I have to say the last time that I saw Jordan Grace, and I mean, I've seen her pictures over here and there and clips of matches, but I've seen her at All In, and then when she come out there, it's like I was really impressed. Like she has dropped like a lot of weight. Like she's
Hmm.
very impressive. Um, and it wasn't a bad match, but you could tell that when Rachel Ellering obviously injured her leg, it threw everything off kilter. And it's one of those deals where you kind of tell they're just trying to pick up the pieces after that. It never really got back
No,
on the
never
rails
got
again.
going. Yeah.
But
Hmm.
not a bad match. And the only women's match on the show, as they pointed out at one point. Jay Griffin put an interesting comment in here. I want to circle back to real quick before we get to the main event. Are there any tag teams performing at a higher level currently than the Briscoes and FTR? You'd be hard pressed to find them.
I don't think anyone's in FTR's ballpark right now. And I like the Briscoes. That match at Death Before Dishonor, tremendous. And I'm not, downplaying it, but I'm talking about right now, it feels like the summer of FTR in a lot
Yeah,
of ways. And I don't want to go off on a big tangent on that, but they may be the most popular act in AEW right now due to the injuries.
yeah,
And the single stars and all that, the Midnight Express theme renovation music that they're using, the stuff they're doing in ROH, and fans are buying it. But you just asked a question, but no, those two. And no, I wouldn't. The Usos, as good as they are, I don't think they're at that level right
no,
now.
no, I don't think so either. And I was disappointed at the holding pattern that FTR seemed to be in for a very long time there. But they finally kind of broken out of that, and like these matches with the Briscoes, and they've even had a chance to have some really good ones on AEW.
And to the gentleman who asked this question, and I'll ask you, Gene, when I was thinking off that Ring of Honor pay per view where FTR and the Briscoes headlined 2 out of 3 falls, when was the last time two tag teams main evented a pay per view show? And I'm not talking about two singles wrestlers like Stone Cold and Triple
Yeah,
H team up to take on Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit. Actual tag teams that are given the trust to close out. I can't remember
I couldn't
how
tell
long it's
you because
been.
I mean, even as much as a focal point of the Young Bucks has been of AEW, they haven't main
Mhm.
evented any of the pay per views. So yeah, that was very telling. Just how much respect that they're given by them. So great question, Jay. Thanks for putting that in there.
Mhm.
So now we get to the main event, what everybody came there to see, and what I'm sure a lot of people are watching this podcast right now,
Mhm.
interested to see our take on it. So here you go, main event: Ric Flair and Andrade El Idolo against Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett, along with Karen Jarrett. So before we dive right into the match, let's take a moment to kind of talk about how this got set up. So you go back a few months and rumors started rumbling around on the internet. Ric Flair is going to have a last match, and my first thought was like, no, I mean, the dude nearly died. That's not going to happen. And then that kind of fizzled out for a little while, and then all of a sudden, this video pops up of him in the ring with Jay Lethal, and in this workout video, Ric Flair is taking bumps that I wouldn't have been comfortable with him taking in a match, much less just working out. And bumps I never would have thought he'd been able to take, in these workout video. I'm like, holy crap, this might be a real thing. And then all of a sudden it got officially announced, at StarCast in Nashville, the weekend of SummerSlam, Ric Flair's last match, the whole event named after him, based around this last match. And so I listen to most of the Conrad podcasts, especially the Jeff Jarrett podcast. Jeff Jarrett's podcast is one of my favorite podcasts right now, if I'm being honest. And so Jay Lethal's supposed to be a guest on there, and Conrad comes on and is like, well, Rick, we were going to have Jay Lethal on this week to kind of talk about y'all's woo off in TNA and talk about some things, but he no-showed today. And Flair's like, yeah, he's pissed off at me right now. I told him that they're just putting a spot for him on the show in Nashville. So I'm like, boom, there it is. Jay Lethal is going to be wrestling Ric Flair. We know that much, but pretty sure this is going to have to be a tag match. So I don't know what the rest of it's going to be, but it's going to be Jay Lethal and Ric Flair. So without thought, which makes it kind of weird that they put out the training video of him in the ring with Jay Lethal just to bring this back around to an angle, but whatever. Then they do the press conference, and then they put out the video where Jay attacks him, and then Jeff tries to help him, and then he's a dick to Jeff, and so then Jeff attacks him, and they stab him in the head, and he's bleeding like he's been shot in the face, and all this.
Why did Flair have to yell out, "That's hard way, brother"? Why did you do that?
There was some weird stuff. Okay, so first of all, Flair's reactions in this video. Okay, first of all, when they go back and recap everything, they say Flair. They show a video of Flair telling Jay Lethal to his face after Jay in this video has professed his love for Rick, and Rick's his idol, and all this. And then Rick tells him to his face, he's like, brother, we're using big names on this. You're just not on that level to be on this show. Now, at this point, there's already been some matches announced. It's like, okay, he's not on Jordan Grace's level. He's not on Josh Alexander's level. Like, okay. So I'm like, man, Rick, that's kind of a dick move there, Rick. I mean, guy's been helping you train. He's not good enough to even be in the Battle Royal. He can't be the fucking Bunkhouse Battle Royal. Like, really? So that made him like a jerk. And then whenever Jeff gets Lethal off of him and he's trying to help him up, and they beep it out, but he's like, F you, Jarrett, I'm sick of you and your dad. I've never liked y'all. I'm like, are they making him are they trying to make him the heel, or is it just that they know that it's Ric Flair's last match? They're going to cheer for him no matter what. So let's just kind of make the story interesting. Like you, I don't know if they thought that was a way to play to the smart fans, because obviously the first line of people this is getting promoted to is the adfreeshows.com listeners who pay every month to listen to Conrad's podcast and go to these events and all this sort of thing. So it's like, okay, are we playing to the smart fans by throwing it's a hard way? And then Jeff goes on the podcast and makes fun of him for it. It's like, did you hear him, Conrad? He was crying, it's a hard way. Now, what I found interesting is they did a whole episode of Jarrett's podcast where it's about Ric Flair. So when they start the podcast, Jarrett's like, all right, Conrad, we're doing a podcast. And he's like, not because I want to. I'm obligated to, you asshole. And they're butting heads the whole time. And Jarrett's calling Flair an alcoholic and just a piece of shit in general and all this kind of stuff. And Conrad's firing back, oh, you're a Flair wannabe. Nobody even knows who the hell Jackie Fargo is. You say that's where you got the strut. And so they're throwing some pretty heavy stuff back and forth to set this match up. I mean, it's basically an hour and a half long promo for this match at StarCast, or Ric Flair's last match, whatever. But then you had the ad-free show fans. A lot of them were in the comments like, we don't pay to get worked on these damn shows. Like, we don't want to, we're not here for kayfabe. We want to hear the real story behind everything, and got pissed about it, which I thought was funny. I went on and put a comment on Twitter. I put, ad-free show fans. We prefer the old school wrestling when they used to kayfabe back when it was good. I was like, also, ad-free show fans, how dare you kayfabe us and try to work us? This sucks. And Conrad was the first person that come back and liked it. Because it's like, okay, why are you mad that a place that charges you to listen to podcasts is now promoting an event on their podcast? Where the hell else are they going to promote it? Conrad doesn't have weekly television to promote this. Where else is he going to promote it but on the podcast? I just thought that was a weird reaction.
And why are they mad that we're trying to do an angle for a match which is the stuff you grew up on, as you said, which is the stuff that's probably the very reason you're listening to these type of podcasts because you grew up and liked that style. Even though it was odd, I appreciated it. I appreciated that Flair on his podcast to be the man stayed in character towards Lethal, Jerry Jarrett, Jeff Jarrett, Conrad siding with Rick, and as you said, the Conrad Jeff dynamic. I'm like, even though we know it's a work, they're not slapping me in the face with this is all wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We're
Well,
trying to give you something to suspend disbelief.
if we listen to an hour and a half podcast before the event of them telling, okay, well, we hatched this plan of, Jay would attack him in the parking lot, and they tell you all the behind the scenes of this match before it actually happens. Who would have gave a crap about watching that? I mean, we all know that's what happened, but we don't need to. I think there's just way too much of that. I still say, and not to go on a big tangent, but like one of the characters that got over bigger than anything in the last 5 years was Broken Matt Hardy because he always stayed in character. When he went on podcasts, he stayed in character, and there was no explanation to what the hell this was. What is that accent? What is he supposed to be? Why is he doing this? When's it going to stop? What? You didn't know. You just had to keep watching it and trying to figure it out. And it got over huge. I mean, when you heard that reaction, the Hardy Boys of 2 years prior to that, had they walked out at WrestleMania, would not have gotten that reaction
Right.
that they got at that WrestleMania had the broken stuff not led them there. And so I still think that there is room for kayfabe in wrestling. And you don't have to be blatant with it. It don't have to be just over the top. But I think people want to have a story they can follow along with. There's a handful of the ones that bitch and go, don't work me, don't kayfabe me, but I want to sit and listen to 8 hours of podcast every week talking about the good old days when it was a work and they did kayfabe me, and I'm mad they can't do it anymore. But like I say, I think it was a good story. You believed, you felt it for Jay Lethal. Like, yeah, F Ric Flair. Of course, Jay Lethal should want to whoop his ass. And then he was a dick to Jeff. So you're like, hell yeah, I get why Jarrett wants to, take him down. And then you got, well, why is Andrade team with Rick? Well, that's his son-in-law. One son-in-law is promoted, the other son-in-law is his tag team partner. You can make sense of that.
Yeah.
Now,
My
reality-wise,
favorite.
you're going like, why are his two son-in-laws allowing him to put himself in this situation? But that's too far out the realism side of things and out of the kayfabe side of things.
Well, as old fans, I really appreciated this line when Jarrett is putting the punches to Flair and David Crockett is screaming, stop. The way Jarrett turns to hell with you, Crockett. My old man never liked yours anyway. I loved that aspect of bringing in the territorial days.
And you can believe that because back in the day, Jerry Jarrett did not like David Crockett, Jim Crockett, and vice versa. I mean, it was real heat back then for a variety of reasons. So that brings us to the main event. We've already showed the graphic. We'll show it again real quick. And so we'll show a couple other pictures here, then we'll kind of talk about the match. There's Jarrett coming down, part of his entrance. This is actually when he threatened to walk out, one of the classic Memphis thing. There's Rick coming through the back. That's him on the ramp as he's being introduced. And here they are in the ring as the match is getting ready to start. Now, I can only imagine what the reaction from the crowd was when the music hit. And I know that, and they kind of him-hauled around a minute, built the anticipation. What was that like being there live, hearing that reaction when Flair came out?
Well, much like you, and we talked about this at the beginning of the program, starting at 6:05 Central, 7:05 Eastern. So the fact we're getting going at the main event about 9:15 on entrances, 8:15 Central. Oh my God, Jay Lethal's visage appears on the screen. Boos for Jay Lethal. And I know we'll touch more about this, but first I'm going to bring it up now. And I think I saw you say something about it. Jeff Jarrett, as a heel, deserves another run in a main company.
Yes.
He looks great. He's always looked good, but he looked phenomenal. I mean, physically in shape, and I mean his gear. And talk about being a heel. Talk about entrances. When he came out, Jay Lethal got booed. Jeff Jarrett, oh my God. I mean, we're talking old days. Yes. And that's the thing. They were booing. The guy beside me goes, "You gotta love Jarrett. My brother went to high school at some bitch." And I was like, "Yes," because he lives in Hendersonville, about 30 minutes away. But the fan who tried to get into it with Jarrett, and he pushes him, and I mean that's what I love
And
because
flung the
again,
beer or whatever it was all over him.
yeah, we're going back to these other matches. No offense to Bandito, Ray Phoenix, any of the rest of them. But this is where I felt like there were some defined true roles, man, because Jeff Jarrett didn't give a rat's ass if he was liked or not. And that is old school. I'm not out here to sell you a t shirt or my collectible mug or even go listen to my podcast. I don't want you to like me because, as he said, I'm going to make sure Ric Flair, to the effect something he said, he's going to die this time. This will be his last match. That kind of heat, like, wow. And that's what I was amazed, Gene, because other than like, sometimes the independent shows, it's been a long time since that's, and even though this was kind of an independent show, I guess, still drew over between 9 and 10,000, but that kind of heat from that many people towards one person, that was something that really stuck on me on his entrance. Andrade, boy, you talk about mild reaction, and I felt bad for him, but we got the heat from Lethal, we got the big heat on Jarrett. Andrade comes out, and it just felt like this crowd, like, dude, get in the ring where Rick can get out here. And I felt so bad for him on that aspect.
Yeah, come on, guy.
And what you talked about on the pay-per-view, everybody else came out pretty quick. There was about a 90-second delay of darkness waiting with all these cell phones and cameras, because this is the moment. And that's what I was telling my friend Parker. I was like, this was the first time he had seen Flair wrestle in person, one of his favorites. He'd never got to see him live because Flair was either injured with WWE, the rotator cuff with WCW, whatnot. But I was like, think about it, man. I was like, this is the equivalent of Muhammad Ali in boxing, Babe Ruth in baseball, Michael Jordan or the late Bill Russell now, basketball, Wayne Gretzky hockey. I was like, this is the guy we all came to see. It's the name on the marquee. And I was like, I love that they're taking that 90 seconds to, you're hearing woos in unison. You're hearing feet beating on those bleacher seats, the bastards that actually stayed in their seats and didn't come down and steal mine on the floor. And you're just feeling this rumble and this buzz and goosebumps. And when you hear woo and the strains of 2001 Space Odyssey, eruption that did not stop until he got in the ring. And I mean, we're going on it. But when he turned around, when Flair came out and turned around, I thought, are the trunks a little loose on him? Is he having to tighten the trunks? Oh my God. Little did I know that kudos to Conrad Thompson, however you found it, he procured the 10 pounds of gold that Flair turned around. That was what he was readjusting. That didn't get as big a pop from the crowd, but man, there was a good section around me. We were like, oh my God, that's the 10 pounds of gold,
Conrad bought that from Scott Steiner a few years ago.
Okay.
He's kind of sort of told the story off and on where he met Scott Steiner in a parking lot somewhere in Georgia and gave him a shoebox full of cash for that belt because when WCW shut down, somehow Scott Steiner ended up with it. And Conrad's had it at conventions and stuff. I mean, me and Rosie got to take pictures with it, wear
nice
robes and all that shit. So that was kind of cool. So, all right. So I'm about to say some things right now that it's going to make it sound like my opinion is one thing, but we're going to come around. Go ahead.
Can I say one more thing on the entrance before you get into that? To our left, where we are sitting, and from the live perspective, we are across from the entrance ramp, so we're looking dead at it on that side. So where you see on pay-per-view, to our left was hard cam, I guess, where earlier in the night, Conrad Thompson, Megan Flair are sitting. Vicky Guerrero joins them. After about match 2, Mick Foley is out. Diamond Dallas Page, who had a spot earlier in the night, he's second row. For this main, a little buzz of security and wearing like a, not pink, not purple, somewhere in between, like a fuchsia pantsuit, Charlotte Flair comes out. Also, The Undertaker with Michelle McCool. Now, all this is happening as Lethal and Jarrett are getting in the ring. But I'm noticing to our immediate left, I'm like, oh my God, look at these luminaries coming out. And then Bret Hart was the final one to come right beside Foley. And I was just like, man, I don't know if they were watching the rest of the show in the locker room or even cared to, but it kind of felt like the boxing feel where you got 9 matches on the undercard and Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder are getting in the ring late in Vegas. And here comes the big celebs out for the big one. And that's what it felt like, one right after another. But yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to get that in.
I knew Charlotte had to be in the building somewhere But I was genuinely shocked to see the Undertaker prominently sitting at ringside. I was like, "Holy shit, that's wild!" Like that's something. I want to so I want to circle back to one thing I missed during
Sure.
someone who does not get enough credit for how much of a heel they are, and they really add to the Jeff Jarrett package is Karen Jarrett. She
Yes.
is a hell of a heel, and people hate her guts, and she is all about it. I mean, she was getting right up in those people's faces. I mean, after Jeff would walk away and they're still talking crap, she would come right behind them and get right in their face. I don't think she gets enough credit for how much of a heel she is. But I thought she really added to this whole thing from the parking lot angle to the entrance, and
Mhm.
then of course there's a spot in the match where she ties up with Flair's Conrad's wife, Flair's daughter.
And referees, if we couldn't get Tommy Young, it was good to have longtime WWE official Mike Chioda doing this
Yeah.
match.
Um.
Dave
So
Penzer on the ring announcing as well.
yeah, when I say I was told, I was like, is that Dave Penzer in the ring? Like, oh, that's crazy. But so the entrance, and that's what as we and her sitting here watching, I said, this is the main event. Flair's entrance is going to be the high
Right.
spot. Everything after this is just what has to happen. But this is what's going to be like. You can kind of live the old days right here, and then it's going to kind of go downhill. So what was kind of concerning to me is Rick comes out and he's struggling with that damn belt. Like he couldn't get the freaking belt off quick enough. But he's kind of just like shuffling down. And I don't know if you can tell this live, but if you go back and watch the video of it, like he's kind of shuffling down the ramp. He's having a hard time walking down the ramp. Like I said, he like to never got that damn belt off. He moved a little better once he got the belt off, but he was struggling with that belt. I told Rosie, I was like, how's he going to work this? Like he's having a hard time coming down the ramp. Like this may not go well at all. And so, having watched the workouts and stuff like that, I know I had read that he apparently injured his foot in training, and so he had that going against him. But and you and I both know. I mean, we've done enough of this to know like it's one thing to get in the ring and training and do some stuff. But and especially if you take Ric Flair in his last match and all the hoopla that went into it, and every most any match on any card, there's a few people who are here to see that particular match, and there's a few people that's here to see you, and then everybody else is just already here anyway. But every single person, from the guy in the cheapest seats to the freaking Undertaker in the front row, is here to see Ric Flair, and that's a different kind of pressure to have on you. That adrenaline, you're 74 years old or whatever the hell it is, and you got this adrenaline rush. If you're going out for your last time, you don't want to embarrass yourself. You want to make up for all these other TNA matches and crap you did. He did not look like the guy at any point in this match coming down the ramp to getting in the ring. He did not look like the guy in those training videos. It was disconcerting. I understand all the people that knock it and all the people that are upset about it and knocking Conrad. I get all that. I get those concerns. It's kind of hard to make an argument against it. But like I told everybody that I talked to personally that was super critical of it, I was like, look, you knew going into this that you were buying a pay-per-view or a ticket to see a man who is in his 70s, who nearly died a few years ago, is not in great health, get in the ring, try to have a match. And everybody, especially people that were in that building, were just there to experience Ric Flair one more time. Like, if you didn't curb your expectations enough to know that, okay, this isn't going to be a great match, this probably isn't even going to be a good match. This might not even be a match, actually. And God knows that Jarrett and Jay Lethal and even Andrade did everything they could around him to make that a viable semblance of a match. You just have to take it for what it is. I mean, I've seen 100 people on Facebook going, Flair's shoulders were down too. It should have been a
Right.
draw. I'm like, are you serious? That's the battle you're picking is his shoulders. I thought the man
Yeah.
was dead. Like I swear, I told Rose like he's had a stroke. Like he is laying there like some asshole in the comments here put, "Did Flair die in the ring? That was one blown up old man." I mean, I literally was like worried about the guy. Like when the match ended, I told her, I was Rosie, like, he may have just died during the finish, like for real. Like he is not moving. And if you watch it on video, and again, you probably can't tell from being out in the crowd necessarily, but if you watch it on the video, when the confetti's falling down and they finally get him upright, he's just like,
Mm-hmm.
he don't look like he knows whether he's on planet Earth. I'm like, I'm seriously like worried he had a stroke or some shit during this thing. Like, this is bad. But then they got him down there, and then Tony Schiavone put him over, and then he eventually was able to cut the promo that he did. That it
And
was,
stated that he forgot half the match.
yeah, and okay, obviously, buddy, you did, but and then I seen people the next day, that. Well, that ain't gonna be his last match. He's gonna do another one. And Conrad, like tongue in cheek, said, join us for Ric Flair's last match too next year or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
I can't think that any promoter from Triple H now being ahead of WWF down to the most shady Mickey Henry, Whitey Jenkins scumbag promoter in the world would put Ric Flair anywhere near a wrestling ring after what they saw Sunday night. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and Ric Flair is my favorite of all time. And I think a lot of people that were in that building or that ordered that pay-per-view, Flair's, if he's not number one, he's near the top of their favorites. Because, I mean, you're not going to order a pay-per-view or, like I did, make the 3.5 hour trip to Nashville about somebody you don't give a shit about. Like, I'm not going to go watch, no offense, first thing comes to mind. I'm not going to watch Coco Beware's final match, drive 3.5 hours, or spend $35 on pay-per-view. So and I'm sorry, Coco is a bad comparison. I'm not going to see PN News. Let me say that. I sported a shirt.
Shane Knowles is racist. He wouldn't go see Coco
Yeah,
Beware.
exactly. Let me say this. I wouldn't order PN News' final match or drive, and I wear a shirt. But I knew going in, we're not going to see Ric Flair 89 trilogy, Ricky Steamboat, with one of those matches taking place in that very venue, or Funk and Flair 89, or Flair and Sting 90, or 92 Rumble. We weren't even going to see '08 Shawn Michaels' first retirement match, right? But I went in tempering those expectations. I said, this guy is my favorite of all time. And I'm just going for the pageantry, the spectacle. And I knew that's what it was going to be. And I knew the good wrestling, so to speak. And as you said, Andrade, Jarrett, and Lethal did some pretty good stuff in there that I think was getting lost over the how bad Rick may have looked. But as far as like the good wrestling matches, I knew that was going to be the undercard.
Yeah.
We're going to see all the stuff like we just spoke about in some of our matches that we talked about. This was the spectacle. This is what you came to see. This was this is it. And I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of using those sports analogies, you may not know if you'll ever be there for Barry Bonds' last home run he hit or the last touchdown pass that Peyton Manning ever throws in a game, but you have an opportunity to be there for Ric Flair's last match, the last time he puts on the trunks and the boots. And, it does go to show how much fans have changed. Because, Gene, let's say if Flair were 73, even in, like, say, 1998, 1999, and this is just my opinion during the Attitude Era, if he's that age and is having his final match then, not as many fans would have cared about his work rate, even though Flair was always a worker. But I think this showed to me the negative comments that, I saw some of the most ridiculous, like, I'm seeing like somebody saying, well, this match wouldn't fly on AEW. I even saw some like, Flair can't hang with Kenny Omega. And I'm like, no shit, Sherlock. Are you... I hate to use that get out of your parents' basement line, but Jesus Christ, who would have thought that going in?
Yeah.
Flair in the 70s and 80s, early 90s, sure, but this is 2022 for a 73-year-old man. And like I said, it was just a spectacle, the pageantry, but like you, I got a little concerned at the end, and since we're just, telling it all here, because we don't care about if we break kayfabe, that's why we're doing old school. When Karen got into it with Megan, I leaned to my buddy Parker and I said, uh-oh. He said, what do you mean? I said, I bet that's buying time, Rick to color. He said, what do you mean? I was like, we're causing a diversion. Sure enough, after all that stuff, here he comes up with the crimson mask by the guardrail. But the part that was a little concerning for me, I loved the finish of one son-in-law, Conrad Thompson, handing the other son-in-law, Andrade the Brass Knuckles, to hand to the dirtiest player in the game to administer on Jeff Jarrett. But Flair's hand was shaking so badly, and I don't know how it came across on the live feed. It looked like Andrade basically had to place them on his hand and direct him to hit
Oh
Jarrett. Is that how
yeah,
it came
I almost
across?
thought he was. Yeah, well, first he tried to put it on the. He tried to put it on the wrong hand. He tried to put it on his left hand, and he was kind of
Mhm.
fighting that off. But even when he got to the right hand, he had to put him on there because that's what I was told. Rosie, like he's not going to be able to lift his arm to swing, and I was shocked that he managed to do it. And to Jarrett's credit, Jarrett sold it like he was shot. I mean, he laid in that
Yes.
ring for for a good while, but it
There was
was
one of there was one of the
it was
spot
like
in the
an
match I wanted to
exhibition,
ask you.
I mean, it wasn't. Nobody was supposed to expect WrestleMania. Anybody with any
There was a
sense?
spot I wanted to ask you before I forget about it. There was one spot maybe because this match went 26 minutes. Now, my personal opinion, Flair could have went out and worked 10 minutes, and the crowd would have went home happy. Why we had to go 26, I don't know. But I mean, I know he likes long matches. But was it? Did this? How did this come across to you? Because to me, it was right by the corner by us, where Jarrett set Flair on the second or top rope, and looked like there was going to be a superplex, and then like kind of just shimmied him down and started working punches. I wonder if that was a Flair said, "I can't do it," or if Jarrett looked at him and said, "Oh, he can't do it."
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think Jared or Lethal One called an audible. And like, no, we're not. No, we can't do it because I mean they were literally. It's like they were pushing just dead weight up onto the ropes. Like he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a guy here in the comments. Let me go back. I didn't want to interrupt, but he put at least he took a good suplex. Jay Lethal just suplexed. He didn't take a good suplex. He just got suplexed. Like there was nothing on Flair's end of that. If you go back and watch that, Jay Lethal just deadlift suplexed his ass. There was no like he took a good He just and then
Yeah.
he was pretty much dead weight. I mean, he was done after that. If he would have, I am convinced, man. If he would have superplexed, if they'd have went ahead with the superplex, that whole show would have took a whole different turn. There would have been an ambulance involved. Like he wouldn't have got back
Mm-hmm.
up from wherever he landed. And I'm not trying to be funny. I'm not trying to
No.
be anything. I mean, there's actually. That's a picture of him as he's sitting up on the rope when they were getting ready to superplex him. And that's Lethal coming in. I'm pretty sure Lethal is coming in and being like, no, we are not. We cannot superplex this dude right now, or we will be committing murder on pay per view. So kudos
My
to him.
my only disappointing part, and you alluded to it, Gene, and that's why you're a tremendous partner to work with on this. I wasn't expecting Flair 92, 89, 85, 81, 90, but just from the workout videos I'd seen in March, April, and May, didn't see any of that.
No.
That's got what got me pretty excited was like, and he did do the headlock takeover in the beginning, but I'm like, we're seeing him run the ropes, shoulder tackles. We're seeing suplexes. We're seeing body slams. And I'm like, okay, there's going to be a good semblance of wrestling from Flair. And to my knowledge, headlock takeover, some pretty bad looking chops, except for maybe one on Lethal. The mule kick to the nards on Lethal with Jarrett. The
Yeah.
brass nuts, the figure four, a little bit of walking and talking with the Fargo strut, whatnot. But I think that was my only like maybe disappointment. I was like, I wasn't expecting Flair in his prime or even in his 40s, but I don't think I even saw the Flair of the workout videos of the last three,
No.
4 months.
When they announced there's going to be a last match, or it got bantered about that there could be a last match, I pictured what we got. But when I saw those workout videos, I was like, man, if they bring him in sparingly and he can do what he's doing in these videos, there might be some semblance of a match here. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. But when he looked so rough coming down the aisle and they let him start the match, and I was like, what are we doing? Like, how's Andrade not starting this match? I
Yeah,
mean,
can we not tag in to build the anticipation? Huh?
I understand the psychology is probably like nobody in this arena is going to expect Flair to start, so let's have Flair start. But it's like nobody in the arena would have been upset. I mean, if common sense would dictate, like, all right, one guy's 75 almost and in poor health, let's let the young guy wear him down, and then he can tag Ricky and Rick, almost
Hmm.
like tagging with a manager, kind of. Instead, they have him start out, and then Jarrett's scared of him, and he won't. I was like, "Whoo, that's not how I would have started. That's not the psychology I would have wanted to start this out with, but it's what we got." So, um, like if the guy who's in the workout videos did not show up Sunday night for whatever reason, I mean, like I say, maybe due to injury, uh, maybe due to a lot of reasons, but in the end, he walked away. Hopefully, he got whatever he wanted or needed out of it, and doesn't
And it
feel
was a
like.
cool. I'm sorry, you mentioned this. It was cool. I'm sure you've seen the picture. 1981, a big shaggy bowl cut. Tony Schiavone interviewing a bloody Ric Flair after capturing the NWA World Title for the first time from Harley Race. 41 years later, the final match. Tony Schiavone interviewing a bloody Ric Flair. A good way to close it all the way around.
And Conrad's, I mean, he's smart. Like that was not by accident. That was not happenstance that they ended up out there in the exact arrangement that they were in 1983. I mean, you got to give the guy credit. He's good at what he does. So we're going to go through some pictures here. These are some that you took and sent to me. So I want to we'll just put these up, and you just there's the backdrop of the ramp.
And that stayed up throughout the entire duration of the night. I was surprised, even through the other matches, they never took it down.
Yeah. Some of these are going to be kind of hard to see, but here it is here in the center of the screen.
Okay, now that one, I think your next one over. Yeah, that is actor Seth Green, most probably famously known for voicing Chris Griffin on Family Guy, as well as creator of Robot Chicken, tons of teen movies like Can't Hardly Wait and whatnot. But what I thought was funny, he's beside us, my friend Parker and I, just eating a pretzel, and he's got his shirt you can't see. It's the famous picture of Roddy Piper, looking at Vince McMahon with the blue WWF jacket with the look. But Vince's face is the alien android from the movie They Live. That's what Seth Green's wearing.
Somebody took a picture with him backstage, and you can see his shirt in that picture. Because I saw that. I was like, "Holy crap, that's awesome!" Because
we chatted him up.
And I'm like, "Is that Blake Christian?" I'm like, "No, that's freaking Seth Green." Like he was there.
Yeah.
Rosie. I mean, more than any wrestler on that show, Ric Flair included. If she would have been there and got a picture with Seth Green of Robot Chicken fame and all that, she would have been more marked out for that than anybody else she could have met.
Oh, we chatted him up for like 3 or 4 minutes. He and I don't know if it was just a friend, publicist, agent, whatnot. They got shafted on their floor seats too. And I'm like, Seth Green gets shafted? But after about the third match, he got bumped up the second row right behind Foley.
I got that corrected. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
So there we see people walking around with Ric Flair style robes.
And that's something that there was a ton of men wearing Ric Flair shirts. But there were so many women, Gene, and you see those two waiting in line to get their refreshments, that had Ric Flair robes, they had Ric Flair socks, they had custom boots, the women had the feather boas. Like I saw more women dressed like Ric Flair than I saw grown men, and that cracked me up.
That's definitely fun. There you see Jeff Jarrett's video wall during his entrance there. Mm-hmm. More Ric Flair. That looks like, from this distance, that looks like Hollywood John Tatum in line for.
Yeah. Well, that's what I appreciate. That guy went to the commitment of having actual wrestling boots yellow with his.
Yes.
Yeah.
He went all the way. There's another shot of Jeff Jarrett's entrance and another one of him on the corner. Scroll upwards here. Let's see.
Okay.
That's Bret, isn't it?
That is Bret Hart. Parker and I were able to get backstage due to the gentleman who made Ric Flair's robe. I don't know if he'd want me to say it. If you know, you know, so to speak, was there and saw him. And he was like, "What are you guys doing?" Said, "We're about to go home." He said, "No, you're not. You're coming with me." So I tried not to be.
Who it was, but it wasn't Ric Flair and it wasn't Shawn Michaels.
Correct. There we go. And I didn't want to be that guy because I'm like, man, here we are. But I'm going to give you a few little scoops from back there. So we go backstage. Bully Ray's walking around. Al Snow, Rey Mysterio. Here comes Megan with Charlotte. Mick Foley came out of Flair's locker room. Some gentleman meets him and says, "My name is Jason such and such from CBS Sports covering the event. Can I get an interview?" Foley right next to us. And the reason I took that picture of Brett, one of my favorites of all time, but my friend Parker saw him like come out of the locker room right beside him, and he got starstruck. He's like, "Oh my God!" He was tongue tied. It's the Hitman. And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh," because he not trying to
It sounds
sound
like you
big
turned into
league.
it sounded like you turned into Dewberry for a moment there.
And he did. It's man Hart. But who knew he would get brought up on it? But Hart came out, and then Miro with Lana, formerly known as Rusev. I do have to tell a story that's going to make our friend Wicked Nemesis very happy. Walking backstage by himself with a black jacket and red Dorothy Gale ruby red slipper shoes from Wizard of Oz is Paul Lee, who tried to go into Flair's locker room and was blocked by security. So that meme that I put on your status, that's why I made it, because
Oh,
he did just go big leaguing like it's Wrestle Jam, and they're like, "Oh, sir," it was so
oh, that's
funny
awesome.
to me.
When I
But
saw that, I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's not legit. Because if he didn't, I'm
mhm.
shocked that he didn't. Because I mean, he politicked every day on Facebook when it was announced Flair was gonna
Yes.
have a match. Every day that jackass was on Facebook, like
Mhm.
trying to get people to get behind it being Ric Flair versus Paul Lee. I'm like, are you kidding me right now?
And it was fun to mix it up. Brock Anderson asked my buddy Parker for a cigarette while we are smoking. Yes, I do. And he cut his eyes, Parker did, and I looked, and behind me, the Undertaker's walking. Now, folks, I don't know if I've seen many people that are legit 6'10 and a half, 6'11 in person. Mark Calloway is every bit of that because I'm 6'1 and a half, and I didn't just have to look up. I had to look up. I was like, Jesus. But I think it was really cool. David Crockett, you saw Tom Pritchard was there. So many people that maybe weren't even out on camera, like Foley, Taker, DDP, and Hart were. A lot of wrestling luminaries back there just hanging out to be a part. Jerry Lawler was there. I think we saw him earlier in the night
Yeah, he was
on a
on
little
camera.
promo with Jarrett. Hmm.
Yeah, that was fun. The implication of some of what was said in that promo. Um,
Yes.
there you see in the ring there, referee Dave Miller for some people who know who that is.
Yeah, that was Foley coming. I took some total fan pictures here for
At
the
first,
exclusive deal here.
when I was downloading this, when you sent it to me to put it on, I thought that was Jeff Garland from Curb Your Enthusiasm. I was like, "Holy crap, Jeff's there!" And I was like, "Oh wait, no, this is Foley." That's okay. Never mind.
Kid Rock, of course, walking around back there too, as Flair alluded that they were going to party at Kid Rock's honky tonk.
Yes, Flair dropping at least 3 f bombs in his last wrestling promo ever was a Ric Flair thing to do. He dropped a lot
My
of them in
tech,
the lead up to this, though. I was like,
yes, he did. And that's
"That's
what I think. My mother loves Ric Flair. She knew I was going, so when I was showing her these videos, and he's like, "I'm a big effing deal," and 10,000 people are going to stand up and say, "F," and she was just like, "Wow, language." I was like, "Yeah," because we've never heard really Flair in a public forum let loose like that.
no." I mean, it's one thing to do it on a podcast, but yeah, I was kind of taken aback by that as well. But
My
uh,
takeaway from it, though, Gene, overall, I enjoyed the experience aside from not getting to sit down. And again, I don't blame that on Conrad Thompson or anyone involved with StarCast. That's employment of Nashville Municipal Auditorium. Crowd was electric, especially for the main. And again, it was not Ric Flair in his prime. But, at 73 years old for a guy that was almost pronounced dead, 14 days on life support in a coma, for him, he got to go out on his terms. He got to color. He got to go over with brass knucks. He
that
got to be right
that
there in front of his grandkids and all that stuff. And so he got to go out on his terms. And I think that was a pretty cool deal.
that was a weird thing too when they were talking in kayfabe terms and they were trying to build up the heat with him and Jeff Jarrett. In that same podcast, Flair's like, "I got blades, brother. I'm gonna be bleeding that night." I'm like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, why would you say that? Like, why on earth?"
Because it's what I know.
It's like, all right, buddy, all right.
Well, and the during one of those, I think it was part one of the documentary, his first wife, Leslie, showed the gold chain where he had a gold razor blade.
Yeah, I was like, this ain't Scott Hall. Like, what? But the weird thing though is I wondered if there wasn't almost some weird psychology to that, where Flair had said in those early videos, I'm going to have a blade and I'm going to bleed. And then he yells, it's a hard way during that
Hmm.
attack. Was that like some kind of weird, like, I'm going to tell him I'm going
Yeah.
to cut myself, but then I'm going to be like,
Hmm.
hard way. And they're going to be like, oh, what's a shoot, brother? They're trying to kill him. And here's a comment we skipped over earlier. Charles Anders says, I'm a piece of shit. Noles, I wouldn't pay $35 to see Coco Beware's retirement match.
But would you pay it to see Ratmaster PN News? That's the $10,000
I
question.
I certainly would. I can't speak for him. Let's throw him up here. Let's throw him on screen here for a minute. So, what do you think, Xanders? I know you're going to say the
I
podcast was
think
too
uh, I
long
think I think
because
Orion Bishop looks like PN News. That's all. I had to go look up that.
I think Bishop needs to become Rat Master OB
Yeah,
new.
and one other thing, and we can forget. This was my last point I wanted to make that I had in mind. I saw so much criticism from pro wrestlers on the independent level, and all I could tell them through messages or on their comments on their statuses is, "May you ever be respected or loved as much as someone at 73 who sold over 9,000 tickets in less than an hour on his name alone. We didn't know the opponent. We didn't know the undercard. And for all it's saying, it was a joke. It was a clown. Maybe so. But the drawing power. And who outside of maybe a John Cena that's been away for a little bit is going to move 9,000 tickets in under an hour based on name alone? So may any of us
Yeah.
ever be that much
Well,
respected and
I've
endeared.
watched guys who can't sell 20 tickets in a fucking armory say Ric Flair has ruined his legacy. It's like
yeah.
nobody's going to care about Ric Flair now. Like, shut up.
Let me just say this: like he got to do his, like he got to have his what everybody dreams of, their pro wrestling funeral. Ford like actually got to have it, and you had
Mhm.
got to have every bit of it. So I was excited for him. I think that's awesome. Of course, I was over
And
my head.
one other thing too, we're talking. After the match is over, the interview with Schiavone, and he walks up the ramp with Andrade, basking in the cheers and the woos and the clap. Jay Lethal comes back out. They have that emotional moment where they broke kayfabe, hugging and thanking him. And I'm like, no matter what, anything else, for Ric Flair to be standing up at the top of that ramp with 10,000 people chanting his name, wooing and clapping with the guy who got him ready to get back in this, Jay Lethal, with his son-in-law, with his grandchildren. Did that not have to just mean the world? As Charles said, you got the dream send-off, the walk-off in the World Series, the final three-point shot, Game 7 of the
And
NBA Finals.
you got to make it your way, like 100% all the way through. It was 100% Ric Flair. Like no one's
Mhm.
ever gonna
And I promise you this: if there was anybody else in that building who was probably second in line behind Ric Flair being over the moon, greatest night of their life, never dreamed something like that could even be possible, it's Jay Lethal.
Yeah.
Because he
Mhm.
legit, I mean, all the stuff he said in the video prior to them doing the angle, I mean, he legit loves Ric Flair. That is his idol. And he sat in the living room watching him as a kid. Can you imagine that? You sit in the living room
Oh my
idolizing Ric Flair
God.
as a kid. Just having that moment on Impact where they went back and forth, the promo is one of the
Yeah.
greatest things ever. But then to be
Mhm.
able to be the guy that everyone knows helped train him to get ready for the match, and then
Mhm.
being one of two people who were trusting him, because I promise you, being his son-in-law, Conrad labored long and hard over who am I going to trust to put
Mhm.
in that ring with my
It was
father-in-law,
probably and it
because
was
if
probably
something
Ric Flair's
happens,
opinion.
I'm sure his wife had already told him, if something happens to him, it's your ass. I mean, so
And that's why even more, I couldn't think, because a lot of people were like, Jeff Jarrett, I wanted this, 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 this. I can't think of a better person than Jeff Jarrett to take care of Ric
no,
Flair in that
Yeah.
because
match.
he's relevant. He was, like I say, he was in tremendous shape, and you could tell he was willing to do anything to play his role that night. He did. He made sure going out to that ring, he was the biggest heel he could be. He sold his ass off for Flair when it come time. He put him over right in the middle. Like, you couldn't have asked for anybody to do any more than what those two guys
Mhm.
did. Him and Jay Lethal both. And so I think those guys deserve a medal for how hard they worked Sunday night,
I think
honestly.
y'all deserve
Yeah.
a medal. Y'all did an outstanding job tonight, Gene. Good job.
Well,
Is that
you
what y'all
deserve
were looking
one because
for?
typically you're not up past 11 o'clock on a
Hey, I was
weeknight.
gonna say this before I left. Shane Knowles, just get here whenever you feel like it, okay, buddy?
1 minute before the countdown clock, I am in studio.
1 minute. I don't know whose iPhone you're using, but it wasn't 1 minute. Y'all have a good night.
Xander's is
You do the
convinced no one
same.
named Shane can get to a podcast on time.
Yeah, it's uncanny. It's uncanny. It's just ridiculous. All right, good job tonight, guys. I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, take it easy. I knew like Xander's has this unwritten rule that no podcast ever should last more than an hour. Like you should just cut it off no matter what's happening. So I was having fun. Well, I can see him on my screen the whole time. So I was watching him squirm. He gave me a time cue at 27 minutes. I'm like, I'm aware. So at that point, I was like, oh, this is going over an hour now.
I just wanted to hear Gene say shitta again. That's all I wanted. I'm marking that so I can have Gene shitta on just over and over again for Sunday.
Just on cheap.
Take shitta.
Picture up and be like, who's this guy's like? It's Take a Shitta from Japan. Obviously, you don't know your wrestling. But let's see. There says there's one new comment. Dustin Bartram says, I enjoyed it. I didn't regret buying it. I didn't either. And like I say, I think they did a good job building a solid undercard where you were thoroughly entertained and you kind of knew what, unlike these boxing matches used to where there were dog shit undercards and Mike Tyson would go knock somebody out in less than a minute.
What was the price, Gene? Not to interrupt. What was the price?
$34.99.
Very feasible in today's market for pay-per-views, by the way.
Yeah, considering, and I don't know if maybe that's why AEW thinks they need to have a 6-hour pay-per-view because it's $50 freaking dollars, and in this day and age when you can watch everything WWE does for $8 or whatever the hell it is on Peacock. But anyway, I appreciate you doing this. Like I said, I was very excited having sit here and watched it and getting the perspective of watching on TV, hearing yours from being there live because. Like I say, I was there live at All In, and I was there live and watched it. About a month later, I watched the video of it. I got a DVD of it and watched it, and it had a completely different feel watching it in my living room than it did being there in the arena that night. Not to say it wasn't a good show, but there's just a buzz, there's just an energy. Watching other people's reaction, you don't necessarily get that cynicism always there that you get when you're sitting there watching at home and you're scrolling through Facebook and people are just crapping on everything, they botched that. One of the biggest, I've been to a lot of big wrestling events in my lifetime. But one of the biggest reactions I ever seen was at All In when Penta unmasked and it was Jericho. When whenever he wrestled Omega and then the lights went out and then he come out and it was Jericho. People lost their freaking mind because he wasn't advertised. Nobody knew he was going to be there because he was having a concert like 3 hours away or whatever the case was. So I knew whatever I thought about it, you were going to have a little bit different take on it, being there live, seeing fans' reactions, and getting to see in real time up close the reactions of the Mick Foleys and Bret Harts, and Undertaker, and guys like that.
I don't know if anybody had a better time than Mick Foley throughout the night. He was loving it.
That's awesome. That is. But yeah, just to see when Flair went over there at the end and goes down the line shaking the hands of the Undertaker, Mick Foley, and Bret Hart, I'm like, buddy, that's some pressure on you, man, to be in the ring, even if you're Ric Flair, but especially if you're Jay Lethal, Andrade, and even Jared, as experienced he is, to know those three guys are sitting in the front row watching you. That's some real pressure, and knowing that those three guys more than anybody know what you're up against in that ring right now, and what you're having to do to deliver a main event on a show like that. So,
and I thought this while being in attendance live, and I was glad to see the internet caught up and did the same thing. I thought when Diamond Dallas Page came in to say he's right behind Michelle McCool, and I joked with Parker. I said, "Look, he's still talking Taker's wife." We get home and there's memes all over everything about it. I'm like, "Oh, this is great."
It was not lost on a lot of people. So yeah, that's cool. So Scotty said, "Great job, guys." Well, thank you, Scott. We appreciate you and everybody who have joined us live, commented, and watched. And anybody who watches this after the fact, we'll have this up on Anchor, the audio version, but we suggest you check out the video version here on Facebook. You can see all these great pictures that we had. But there will be an audio version up probably in the next 2 days, and we will be back soon with our episode on exotic Adrian Street. I know we promised that in episode 3, but I just felt like this was just a perfect opportunity, even though the show's not old school, but what's more old school than Ric Flair? And
well, I wanted to say
that whole
kudos to
evening.
you, Gene, for coming up with this suggestion of getting the two different perspectives of watching this event at the same time. And as you said, a lot of the rest of the card not old school, but yeah, for Ric Flair's last match with what we do here on this format, this just felt like a no-brainer to do so.
Absolutely. Well, I'm pleased with how it turned out, and thank you for doing it. And we will announce a date for the Adrian Street episode real soon. And again, I'll say this at the end of every show. If you have any ideas, having watched some episodes of Old School Dives and kind of getting a feel for what we're doing, if you have any suggestions over topics you would like us to cover, because it's not always going to be just about a guy in situations like this. It may be about an entire event or just different things. If you have suggestions, shoot them to us. We'd love to hear them because we want to talk about stuff people want to hear. We're not just doing this, just to be doing it. We want it to be interesting. We want it to be something people want to see and hear. And what better way than to give us some input, let us know what you want to hear. So for Shane Noles, I'm Gene Jackson. Once again, we appreciate you tuning in, and we appreciate Charles Anders hanging out in the background producing us.
What a cameo towards the end.
Heck yeah! Well, he had to get his shit in. So, but he did when he was worried you weren't going to show up on time. He did take the extra step of putting a shirt on in case he did appear on camera. He was rocking a black mustache and no shirt. That was quite the look he had going on.
Well, now I wish I was late so we all could have been.
Out of respect for the viewers, he goes. I go, we're a minute out and there's still no Noles. He goes, let me put a shirt on. And then right as the theme music starts, all of a sudden you popped up. I know he was there thinking, like, oh, put the shirt on for nothing. Damn it. All right. I'm the world's worst at ending this. Noles, you got anything you want to plug or anything you need to push before we go away?
I just want to say in the immortal words of the clan from Married with Children, whoa, Bundy!
Check out TP TV live Sunday nights, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The rumor is we may possibly have Sal Renaro as our guest if Xanders can wrangle him. He tried to wrangle Posey. That didn't work out. He tried to wrangle Waddy Jenkins. That didn't work out. So 3 strikes and he's out. This may be Charles Xander's last podcast. Who knows? So make sure you tune in Sunday night. Make sure you tune in Sunday night. And if it turns out to be really super critical of him on the internet the next day, because that's what we do as wrestling fans. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.